Hello there. I'm Paul Engel. I want to welcome you to the Constitution study today, where we take the Constitution and return it to its rightful owners, we the people. That's right. It is us. I'm glad you could join me here today. If you're a first-time listener, welcome. Thank you very much for coming here. I hope you'll thank whoever sent you here after you've heard this episode. We look at, in this case, current events. We're going to look at things through the lens of the Constitution. If you're a returning listener, again, I thank you. It's important that we dedicate some time and effort to understanding the Constitution if we wish to remain the land of the free and the home of the brave. I hope you'll visit the website, constitutionstudy.com. You can find the blog posts that I'm based this on. You'll find this episode as well as any notes. You can join my mailing list. Right now, if you join the mailing list, you'll get a free copy of my essay, How the 16th and 17th Amendments Destroyed the Republic. It's kind of a provocative title. I hope you will check it out. I also hope you'll go on and ask some questions. I use the questions and the feedback that I get to help determine what I'm going to be looking at, what podcasts I'll be doing in the future. Who knows? Your question may make it on the podcast, may make it on the website. I may even have you on to discuss your question if it's really that good. I also hope you'll check out my Patreon site, patreon.com/Constitution Study. There's a link on the website. That's how I pay for the work that we're doing here, and I'm looking to do some more work, invest some more into the podcast, into the website, and into what I'm doing. So all of that, again, I look most for your questions. I'm looking for that feedback because I want to come up with more interesting podcast episodes, such as today's episode. Today's episode isn't actually off of one question, but it's a lot of questions, a lot of things that I have heard over the years about the Constitution, which is why I call this Myths About the Constitution. I've said for years, it's not what you don't know that gets you in trouble. It's what you know that just ain't so that really gets you every time. So I thought I'd take some time and I'd go over some of the myths that I commonly hear about the Constitution. Like most myths, many of these come with a little bit of truth. So let's take a look at some of them. I'm going to start with this concept of the living, breathing document. I hear this one all the time. I hear it from Supreme Court justices and lawyers, people who should know better. People whose job it is to understand the Constitution. They're telling us that the Constitution has to, quote unquote, evolve with the times. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg even says that our Constitution doesn't work anymore. So there's just one serious problem with that. There is not one other legal document in the world where the meaning of it changes without changing the language of the document. You see, the Constitution is a contract. All right, technically it's a compact, which is a contract between sovereign entities. So you remember, when we declared independence, we created 13 independent states. Go read my article on the Declaration of Independence. There are 13 independent states, independent nations. They contracted together to create the federal government about 12 years later and establish the rules by which this new government would work. All 13 states signed under this contract, and every state that has joined the Union since has also signed. So like any other contract, the Constitution should only be interpreted by the words on the page. When the definition of those words are in question, we should look to the people who signed the contract. Think of all the contracts we deal with every day. Contracts for cell phone, repair work on your home, or when you buy a car. Now imagine if the contract you signed could be reinterpreted, not based on the words on the page, but what someone thinks should be there. Worse, imagine if the law doesn't mean what's actually on the page. Imagine if it's prosecutors could just make things up and say, well, I know the law says the speed limit here is 55, but I really think that's too fast. It really should only be 45. Think I'm kidding? Look at some of the opinions we've been getting from the Supreme Court and from other courts. They look at the law, they don't like what it says, and they come up with something completely different. And again, I'm going to pick on the Supreme Court. See, the Constitution says all legislative power is granted, hearing granted, shall be vested in a Congress of the United States. It means that laws can only be created by Congress, only by the process established in the contract, and only for the powers granted in the contract. It doesn't mean the Supreme Court can make laws. It certainly doesn't mean that a Supreme Court opinion is the quote-unquote law of the land. We're going to be hearing a lot about the confirmation of Justice Kavanaugh, hopefully the confirmation of Justice Kavanaugh. And we're going to hear a lot of talk about Roe v. Wade and stare decisis and the law of the land. The Supreme Court cannot legally make law because the Constitution says only Congress can make law. Guess what? Let's go a little farther. Congress cannot give its law-giving authority to the executive branch. It cannot say, executive branch, you create an agency that will write regulations that will have the rule of law. That's illegal. It's unconstitutional. And it's a myth that that's how things are supposed to work. Oh, by the way, and that little bit of truth I mentioned before, you see, the Constitution can be changed. Article 5 describes how we amend the Constitution. So in a way, it is a living document, but only when it's changed legally. So there's one. Let's see. Oh, the next myth. I love this myth. The 3 co-equal branches myth. How often have you heard it stated that we have 3 co-equal branches of government? I've heard judges say it. I've heard politicians say it. I've heard everybody say it. See, we do have 3 branches of government, but it doesn't take much work. A quick read of the Constitution, you'll just the first 3 articles, and you will see that they are anything but equal. Congress is given the most enumerated powers. They are giving, I believe it's 27. The executive branch has 5, and the judicial branch sort of has 2. See, Congress determines what money the executive branch can spend, how many federal courts there will be, and with only a few exceptions, what cases those courts, including the Supreme Court, can take. If that isn't enough for you, you still think the branches are equal? Think about this. Only Congress can remove a member of the executive or judicial branch, but neither of those branches can remove a member of Congress. Only the people, through their vote, or Congress itself, through its authority to punish its members, can remove a congressman. Those are the only choices. So think about it. If most of the powers that are delegated have been given to Congress, if only Congress can control the money, if only Congress can remove an executive or a judicial branch member, how are they equal? How is that anywhere near equal? Yet we continue to either give credit or give blame to the president when it's Congress, the people who represent us, the people we hire through the vote, that actually have the power and most of the time just sit on their backsides and ignore it. Okay, well, let's go back to the judicial myths. Again, we've got Justice Kavanaugh. You're going to hear a lot about, judges have lifetime appointments, but it just isn't true. I mean, you're going to hear it with Kavanaugh, and during the presidential campaigns, you heard all about how important it is to have the right president, to pick the right judges, because they have lifetime appointments. There's just one problem. They do not. Let me repeat that. Judges do not have lifetime appointments. The Constitution reads, the judicial power, this is Article 3, by the way, the judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court and in such inferior courts as Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. The judges both of the Supreme and inferior courts shall hold their offices during good behavior. That's right. Judges are only supposed to keep their job as long as they behave themselves. So how do we define good behavior? Well, let's take a look at the Constitution. Article 1, Section 2, Paragraph 5 reads, the House of Representatives shall choose their Speaker and their officers and have sole power of impeachment. Article 1, Section 3, Paragraph 6 says, the Senate shall have the sole power to try all impeachments. The House of Representatives has the sole power to impeach or to indict, and the Senate has the sole power to try those impeachments. That means Congress determines what good behavior is for a judge. The problem is Congress has been derelict in their duty to ensure good behavior of the judiciary. And whose fault is that? It's back to us, folks. We hire these people. They're not doing their jobs. When are we going to start firing these people? When are we going to stop looking for how much money they're going to bring home and start looking at whether or not they'll do their constitutional jobs? Okay, I've got a couple more for you. Let's start with, here's a good one. We heard this back in 2016, ended November, December 2016. Every 4 years, we are bombarded with polls and statistics about the presidential election. And every 4 years on election night, we see reports about the quote-unquote popular vote. There's just one more little problem. There is no such thing as a popular vote for president. Article 2, Section 1, Paragraph 2 states, each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct a number of electors equal to the whole number of senators and representatives to which the state may be entitled. See, yes, we all vote, but take a look closely at the ballot you're voting on. You'll see that you're not voting for president and vice president. You're voting for electors that have promised to vote for one or the other candidate. What really gets my ire up is this thing called the Agreement Among the States to Elect a President by National Popular Vote. It's a compact between 10 states, or at least 10 states as I'm recording this, and it gives their electors to whoever wins this mythical popular vote. Basically, these states are going to ignore the will of their citizens in favor of the citizens of other states. While the states are allowed to choose their elector in any means the legislature chooses, those who join this compact are doing so in pursuit of a democracy that this nation was never designed to be. We are a republic. Now, Webster's 1828 dictionary defines a republic as a commonwealth, a state in which the exercise of sovereign power is lodged in the representatives elected by the people. In modern usage, it differs from a democracy or democratic state in which the people exercise their power of sovereign in person. Yet the democracies of Greece are often called republics. See, we are designed to have states as a buffer between the people and the federal government, and these people don't like that. And I find it interesting that it seems to be the people that are pushing for this the most are the ones that have won the quote-unquote popular vote, but lost the actual election. Just saying. Okay, I got a couple more. Let's see. The supremacy of federal law. Another good one. So yes, there is a supremacy clause in the Constitution. Let's read it. This Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made or shall be made under the authority of the United States, shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby. Anything in the Constitution or laws of any state to the contrary, notwithstanding. This is actually Article 6, Paragraph 2 of the U.S. Constitution. So you see, there is a supremacy clause, but only laws made in pursuance of the Constitution are included in that supremacy clause. That does not mean that any law passed by Congress and signed by the President is automatically the supreme law of the land. Instead, it must be made in pursuance to the Constitution. Now, since the 10th Amendment gives any power not specifically delegated to the United States, i.e. the federal government, to the states and to the people, any federal law that does not conform to said delegated powers is not only not supreme, but as Thomas Jefferson said, whenever the general government assumes undelegated powers, its acts are unauthoritative, void, and of no force. Guess what? Most of the laws that Congress passes and the President signs are not pursuant to the Constitution. That means they're not legal. That means they're null and void, and they only exist because we, the people, and the states follow this fiction that whatever the federal government says is true. Guess what? Part of why we're here is to learn what the laws actually are, what the Constitution actually says, so we can take back control from this overgrown, bloated, and out of control federal government. Which brings me to my last and probably one of the saddest myths, the myth that the Constitution just doesn't matter anymore. You know, I hear this all the time. In fact, last time I heard it, I was sitting in the barber shop and I was talking to a gentleman. And he said, well, you know, the Constitution just doesn't really matter anymore. And unfortunately, this is a myth that is quite close to becoming true. See, it's usually spoken by people who are in desperation, by those disgusted with how Washington works. The fact that they ignore the Constitution and nobody does anything about it. They figure if no one's going to do anything about it, it just doesn't matter anymore. But that is not true. That is why the Constitution study is here. See, the fact that those in Washington routinely ignore the Constitution, that is not the problem. The fact that we the people, ignore it is the problem. See, if we held our elected officials to their oaths to defend the Constitution, if we knew how to assert and defend our rights, if we knew what the Constitution actually says and were willing to defend it, then once again, it would matter in our society. Sure, there are those who don't like the restrictions the Constitution puts on government, and those who think it's only some old and outdated document. There are those who think we'd be better off without knowing what this dusty old document says. But since it was we the people that ordained and established this Constitution, then it is we the people who determine when it stops mattering. If we want the Constitution to matter again, then it must be up to us to learn for ourselves. For few of those in government want us to know what we the people are, how we hold power in this nation. See, the Constitution started out with a preamble that said, we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, to ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. It is us. It is we, the people, that do ordain and establish this Constitution. We did it to create a more perfect union, to establish justice, to ensure domestic tranquility, to provide for our common defense and promote our general welfare, but most importantly, to secure the blessings of liberty not only to ourselves, but to our posterity. If you haven't noticed, this gets my dander up because we are watching the Constitution be washed away because we won't do our job. We won't stand up and say, wait a second, there are rules. We created this for a reason. We determined what it said. The states signed the Constitution, this contract. We're going to enforce it. And if you represent us and you don't do your job, you don't defend the Constitution, not just your opinion of it, but what it actually says, you don't deserve to be in Washington. You don't deserve, you're not representing us. See, when we, the people, figure out that we actually hold all the cards, we have the power because we get to decide who is in the House of Representatives, who is in the Senate, who is the president. We get to decide that if they're not doing their job when they pick Supreme Court justices or any justice, that when they don't hold them accountable for their behavior, when they figure out that we actually hold the cards because we're going to start exercising them, then the Constitution will matter again. Then we will once again be the land of the free and the home of the brave. So I hope you found some of this interesting. I hope maybe it made you think. I really hope you'll head up to the website, constitutionstudy.com, ask a question, make a comment. You can also find me on Facebook, facebook.com/constitutionstudy. There's also a YouTube channel. We're looking for people who are interested in learning the Constitution. It's not that hard. Join us. Help us find out these myths. Help us combat these myths. and help us return this nation to its rightful owners, we the people. I wish you a good day, and I hope to see you again the next time on the Constitution Study.